My Gavan and Melanine, and well met indeed. I'm Arakir Gala-Dirathan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and after something like a 2 or 3 month break from purely DaC related content, here we are again with another developer diary. Now there is a ton to get through today, and so hopefully it remains relatively entertaining. I will just read through my list and try and group things together, but as ever I will fail at that, so we might be darting here, there and everywhere, so do bear with me. I've chosen Imladris as our guide through these new changes, and of course there's a slew of campaign changes and then a lot of battle map changes. Also, do as ever take this as a disclaimer that there is still works ongoing and to be done, and so there are some things that I may have talked about in the past that are not yet in the game, and that's just because of course we talk about these things and we prepare to implement them, and then it just takes a while to actually getting around and doing it. So, without any further ado, let's do. The first thing is, of course, to again remind everyone and welcome officially Rohur to the modding team of Divide and Conquer. Rohur brings with him budding enthusiasm and an incredible work effort. And the main thing that he has brought with him thus far and changed is a huge overhaul of all of the traits and ancillaries. Traits and ancillaries. Now, not many of these are really reflected in Eladan, Elrahir or Elrond, but these are just the only people we have. Essentially what has happened now is that anything that was broken has now been fixed. Chief amongst these were race traits that pass between father to son and ancillaries that pass between father to son. Previously they weren't really working. Also there was problems with anti-traits, which means you can't get this trait if you've got this trait, etc. Things like that. There were quite a lot of behind the scenes bugs that you just wouldn't know were taking place. For example, one such thing is the fief ancillaries of Gondor. So every general that starts in one of these towns starts as the Lord of somewhere, like Lord of Lamadon, Lord of Lossarnak, Lord of Pinneth Gelen, etc. If that Lord were to die, you are supposed to be able to get these ancillaries by popping a general in there and waiting and he will get it. But there were odd little bugs around this and that. So, first things first, the bugs are all fixed, so traits and ancillaries now work exactly as intended, so that is ideal. Secondly, chivalry has been redone. You may have noticed when you looked up there, and is now called renown. It is no longer called chivalry, and every general in the game, bar a very few who I'll cover in a moment, now only get positive chivalry, or positive renown. So previously, chivalry and dread were the traits of Medieval 2, and chivalry increases your army's morale, and dread decreases the enemy's morale. There were, however, some concerns and some bugs again around this, and we've taken the decision, and Rohur has implemented, that now every general can only get positive chivalry. They don't get dread, except Sauron, the Balrog, possibly Saruman. I think the list was written somewhere. I should have written it down. And one or two others. But anyway, the beings of intense hatred. Oh, also the Nazgul. Sorry, those kind of real evil creatures. They now start with dread, and they can only get dread. They cannot go positive. And every general that starts positive, which is basically every other general, they cannot go negative. Renown can go down, but it cannot go into dread. So all normal generals now have locked positive chivalry, and negative is for only a few. Piety, as was before, plays absolutely no bearing in this religion-free game, so it has been renamed to Acumen, and Rohur has edited quite a few traits and things related to Acumen to make it so that it now plays a larger part in city management. So the higher your general's acumen, the better a governor he will be. So it's no longer linked to religion and increasing the spread of your culture in a location, which is what it was for in Med 2. It is now a governor management trait, which is very, very good. In addition to this, many of the old traits and triggers have been completely reworked. Quite a few of the more mundane Med 2 ones have gone, and 100 new traits have taken their place, all Lord of the Rings themed or at least fitting to the setting. So traits and ancillaries have been overhauled quite substantially, which is very, very good. So there we are. And that, as I say, has come with Rohur. Right, so moving on. in regards to the Elven factions, the Sylvan Elf factions, which is Lothlorien and the Woodland Realm, they are now better archers overall than Imladris, or the High Elves as they are of course now called. Now, it's not massive, but generally speaking, they have a little bit more range and a little bit more damage over their High Elf equivalents. So the elite Woodland Realm archers are slightly better than the elite High Elf archers. Now, some of you will cry bloody murder at this, because you will think that the High Elves should absolutely be the best at everything on God's green earth. But unfortunately, they have to be a little bit worse in some areas, and it's just a good way of giving the other elves an area and a way to stand out a little bit. That is good for that. The level 2 leather worker, the blacksmith building. I don't know what it's called for the elves. Leather something. Leather worker. Oh, it is leather worker for them too. Anyway, that now requires a town, which is a little bit of a restriction on Bree, because Bree recruit units from their blacksmith line, and you were able previously to build the level 2 blacksmith in villages, which meant Bree could get some of its elite units from villages only, which we didn't really want. Bree already has a little bit of a problem of being too militaristic when they shouldn't be. So anyway, in addition to this, in terms of buildings added, Mithlon now starts with a level 2 town hall rather than a level 1 town hall. And some Imladris' starting garrison, as you can see, has been reduced down from elites to middle tier. This was because Imladris started in debt and they just fell away like a waterfall. It was very difficult for the High Elves to actually make money. We'd given them 2 elite units, or I had given them 2 elite units. So, quite rightly, those have been reduced down. Now, when you're, as I say, I'm going to jump all over the place with factions for this, because I just copied and pasted them. I should have sorted them, but I didn't, because I have failed there. But anyway, we're jumping all over. Erebor, when you play as Erebor, so when you are Erebor, Gundabad, who of course are over here, they now get Witherboard in the auto expansion, so they'll be knocking on your door relatively early. They just weren't aggressive enough, so we had to give them a little boot up the backside. When you play as Angmar, Moria will no longer get Bruenost, which is this region down here. Now this just stops them encroaching on your territory too much by popping them right next to the Dunedain capital. And it also means the Dunedain don't have to worry as much about Moria straight away, meaning they can focus on you a little bit more. So that's pretty damn good. The battle map for Dol Guldur, which it's only minor changes, so I won't show you, but the units can no longer attack or shoot through the inner wall. So the central square, as I'm sure if you've played the Dol Guldur map, is raised up on a secondary wall, and no longer can units shoot through the wall down onto the units below. They have to do the arcing shot, as would be correct. And the climate for the battle map has been changed to the Moria climate rather than the Mordor climate. So it resembles a more mountainous, a dark mountain rather than just ashen wasteland, which is good, because it should be a dark mountain. If you are playing as Anduin, your King's Purse has been boosted by 500 gold coins, and you get an extra unit of Woodland Trackers in the Framsburg starting garrison, which is all the way up here. So you're a little bit better equipped to deal with Gundabad, which is good. We're not even halfway through. The Woodland Realm and Lothlorien now get a slightly larger starting auto-expansion armies as well, so there'll be a little bit more of a threat in the beginning. That's Woodland Realm and Lothlorien. Some campaign strategy changes, nothing new, but just things changed up. So Angsul now starts as an Angmarim castle rather than a Wildmen castle, so it just fits your expansion a little bit better. Gobadrine is now a Angmar town, whereas it was a village way back when. It's now an Angmar town. And Athelin is now a Dunedain village. So just visually, those have been applied a little bit more to the nations near to them. You may have noticed as we've been hovering around Imladris, you can no longer access Imladris from the east. It is now impossible to do so. You can't even get into the Imladris province from the north. You have to now go round across that bridge and into Imladris. And if you're coming from the south, of course, you just have to go down the main path there. So Imladris cannot now be beset on all sides by Moria walking backwards and forwards, and it should also now assist Moria a little bit in knowing that they have to go that way, rather than sometimes they try and send troops through the middle, they realise they can't get through, they go back again, and they end up just moving their army backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, and it just massively hinders them. So this is A, little bit of a defensive boost for Imladris the town, but B, a little bit of a pathfinding aid for Moria. And keep saying Moria, because they're not called the Misty Mountains anymore. I must remember to get this right. Anywho. When you are anybody but Angmar, they will now get Goberdrine in the turn 1 auto expansion. Angmar needed a little bit more assistance. They weren't really doing well against their 4 enemies. So it aided them a little there. Also, the armies that they auto expand with are now a little bit bigger in size. So as in the early game, Angmar's AI will now put up a little bit more of a fight. The only way that we can help them by giving them more troops, gold and regions. So they will fight a little bit harder. Now, Mordor has had a little bit of an overhaul, really. Not an overhaul per se, but they've been adapted and edited, and I have grouped all of these like a wise one. So, first and foremost, Uruks and Uruk Halbeards, their elite units. They now have a max pool of 3, down from 4 in the highest tier barracks. So you should see a little bit less of them. Now, to plug that gap, Mordor's Candish, Hradrim and Runic armies are now more readily available. So the units that you get from Khand, Harad and Rune, you can now train those quicker and easier in and around Mordor. So you'll have more general armies representing Mordor's being the hub, the center point of this grand evil campaign. You'll get a few more units from your allies. Morgul Chosen are now available from the level 3 barracks in the Morannon, as well as Cirith Ungol and Minas Morgul, so they come from an extra location. Sauron's Will now come from the level 3 barracks in the Morannon and Minas Morgul, as well as Barad-dûr, so again, 2 new locations for Sauron's Will, just giving you a few more of those. The AI only, so not a human, but the AI can recruit their Temple Knights, Wards and Marksmen faster from the barracks in Durthang. So the AI might have a few more Dark Numenorians to throw at you, which is nice. And then something that's changed to try and make the early game a bit harder for the player is a locked Nazgul system, in that you will start with one single Nazgul at the beginning of the game, and then every 10 turns up to turn 50, the other 4 will unlock. So I believe you start with the Witch King at turn 1, and then you get 1, 2, 3, 4 thereafter every 10 turns, to try and slow down how absolutely mind-numbingly easy the early game is for Mordor. Now, this is a cracking idea to limit the Nazgul, but something that I will definitely push for is to send the Nazgul off map rather than just have them locked there, because many people, of course, do not watch these developer diaries. DaC is infinitely more popular than my YouTube channel. And they're going to come to this and think, why are my Nazgul not moving? Something is bugged there. So we will look into definitely getting these sent away and spawning when they come back to you. And there'll be a message at the beginning of the game as well to explain this. Now, no one reads those messages, but it's the best that we can do to put them in, and then we can at least bang our head against the wall, knowing we've done everything in our power before we get the onslaught of questions. But do feel free to ask questions, of course, but do just have a little look for the answers before you do. But anyway, so the Nazgul are now locked. You won't be able to pull all of them into one army and take Minas Tirith in the first 10 turns. It's just not possible anymore. Well, I mean, it might be, depending on your skill with early tier orc trash. So that's Mordor's little overhaul. They get a few less Uruks, but they get a few more of the other units, and the Nazgul are now locked so that you won't have them all until turn 50. And then you'd need Dol Guldur to die to get all of them, of course. But speaking of Dol Guldur, when Gundabad now capture Dol Guldur, they can no longer train Castellans, and instead they get Uruk Slayers out of Dol Guldur rather than Castellans. So a little bit of a decrease in incentive, but it was applied unilaterally. Roads no longer give a culture conversion bonus, and instead the culture buildings now give a bigger bonus. So the level 2 one now gives 3% instead of 2%, and the level 3 now gives 5% instead of 3%. So the culture buildings are now more important for spreading culture. And also because, of course, do remember that in whatever the next developer diary is, we will have removed the experience bonus from any building that gives an experience bonus because of the retrain bug. And culture buildings are one such thing. So it's on one part, it's a method of making the culture buildings more important for what they actually do, rather than getting them for culture and then also using them to upgrade your troops. They now are almost purely for spreading culture. They will have the odd ancillary bonus as well from the highest tier culture building, but it won't be as pronounced. For example, What one is our culture building art? Oh, we can't see it. Oh, hang on. We can go from here, though. So, for example, the high elf one at the moment gives an increase in tradable goods at the highest tier, as well as 5% culture increase. That's 3% on the first and 1% on the first. So it just makes them have more of a purpose, which is good. The number of units that now actually have a bonus against wargs has been severely limited. There's only about 15 units in the whole game now that get a bonus against wargs. Previously, I had applied it rather liberally, but it has been reduced to units that would thematically have it, essentially. For example, I haven't listed the units because as a minor point, but do note that these changelogs are available online. You can read the full changelog rather than this sort of edited one. But nations that now will have a bonus against wargs are the Northern Dundine, the High Elves, and Anduin off the top of my head, probably Woodland Realm and Lothlorien, and it's only a few select units amongst their rosters. So wargs should be a little bit more important in the future. A new unit that you will see in the second half of this video, the Avari Spearmen, have been made available as mercenaries for all Elven factions around Central Rovanian and Dorwinion. So if you're playing as the Woodland and Lothlorien and the High Elves, if you make it over there, stranger things have happened, and you make it out to Central Rovanian, you'll get to recruit a few Avari units as mercenaries, which is good. Something I have already touched upon, but to talk about it all in the developer diaries to keep it all in one place, and that is a redrawing essentially of the terrain types around the map. So anywhere that has hills predominantly in its area, such as Erland's Ferry, that will now be classified as a mountain region. Now, I use the term mountain because that's what the files call it, but really think of it as a rough region or a hilly region or something along those lines. But do note that the green book has actually been updated so that if the main terrain is mountains, it will say main terrain, mountain or hills. It won't say mountains when there's hills, so it does make sense. But anyway, so the mountain resource has been spread around the world a little bit more by including locations that just simply have like rougher terrain or hills. Again, such as the Emmen Wheel, they need to ideally be 50% or more of that single terrain type for them to be classified as it. Because, of course, we can only apply one terrain type. So a region such as Lim here, for example, has forests, but it is predominantly grassland, so it gets the grassland. That's how the bonus works. But something else that I've also done, but not edited the map yet, but I intend to, is there are also now a lot more forest regions. I will go around the map and actually put down more trees so that it is a bit more visually obvious which region is which. But the spread of grassland, mountain, forest and desert is now a lot better. With a boost to mountains and forest, which is important because a lot of factions get bonuses in certain terrains and not others, whereas previously there was something like, of our 199 regions, something like 125 or 140 were grassland, so it was totally useless having this restrictive system. But instead, it is now 81 provinces are grassland, 55 are now mountain or hill, and 50 are now forest. So a much better spread. There are 12 desert regions, though. Desert is still basically useless. But we just can't apply desert anywhere else because it doesn't work. There are no other deserts. So we're stuck with that. I suppose we could create an entirely new resource, like waterways or something, couldn't we? But then waters are so common that would be difficult to spread around. But there's a go. If you've got any thoughts on that, because 12 desert regions, it's hardly worth even having it. And it only really helps Harad anyway, and it's already in their heartland. So if you could think of an alternative fourth region resource, I'm very open to it. I mean, alternative, we can, of course, just get rid of it altogether and just turn desert into grassland and just call this grassland. But if you've got any thoughts on another region type, do say, because looking at it now, 12 desert resources, it's just not worth it. It's just so stupid. But anyway, there we are. So some changes to that. The green books have all been updated or amended to reflect what terrain type a region actually is. Or I think the foundations have been set. Sorry, they haven't actually been amended yet. But the green books have been spread around the world accurately. So they will reflect the region that they are in properly, and they will tell you what province and etc. So you can now go to the green book if you are not sure what type of terrain the province you have is. The books will be updated to reflect it 100%, so no longer will they be totally incorrect, which they are at the moment. The final thing then is another change for the elves before we jump over to the battle map, and that is that the AI for the High Elves, Lothlorien and the Woodland Realm will now be able to recruit 2 Tier 1 units, normally an archer and a melee, at a much faster rate out of their capitals. So the High Elves, the 3 Elven factions, get faster recruitment on their lowest tier units from their capitals, so they can just get a few more troops out because they do struggle with volume of forces. But anyway, there we are then. So that's all the changes thus far on the campaign map side of things. There's quite a few changes on the battle map side. So we'll jump over there and we will just dive straight into it. I hope you enjoyed the transition as much as I did. So, first of all, starting off then are the new voices that I have spoken about. This is for Enedwyth, for Dunland, and for Dorwinion. So we will go through each faction in turn, and we are first of all starting with Enedwyth. Again, these voices were given to us by Jay McDougall, and he provided the voices for all 3 of these, so Dunland, Dorwinion, Enedwyth, and Gundabad as well, and we are very grateful to him for his assistance. So I will stop speaking, and you can just listen to them as they all shout out things.
Sons of Enedwyth, we march together. Hold this line. Hunters.
Now is our time.
We stand ready. Wash him away. Hold this line. With the spears. For Enedwyth. Wash him away. We stand ready. The clans. Sons of Enedwyth. Ballista!
Oh, no, that's just a ballista.
With the archers.
Anyway, so you get a little bit of a flair. They sound kind of like country bumpkin folks from England, really. But it works very well.
The clans.
Of course, they're not a militaristic people, so and that was part of the brief requested, that they're not going to sound like they're really bloodthirsty, out for vengeance. They are just people defending their homes, and they have a strong sense of unity to themselves, and that's reflected in their voice lines. Additionally, their battle banner has been edited by Mats, our now sort of resident UI worker, really. And we're thankful to him for that. So no longer is it just an image of what was their UI to simply put on a banner. It is now a bespoke banner, which I think is a lot better.
With axe and shield we stand. We stand ready.
So there we are. That's Enedwyth. Now we'll go for Dorwinion. So, the Elven forces of Dorwinion have not been amended, so I've popped one of those in just for you. So they still sound like the elves from the Battle for Middle-earth, because they didn't have any voice clips recorded for them. But the humans have been.
An extra barrel for all. They're backed up now. Weapons ready. Where are they? Regent's men will take it from here. Dorwinion will be counted. Hold true, boys. Men of the Thorn. Stand together. Sworn to honor. Knights. My liege. Sworn to honor. You honor me. You honor me. You honor me. Hunt them down. Riders. Mounted and ready. Men of the Thorn. Mounted and ready. Hunt them down. This thing's a little dusty. This thing's a little dusty. Levies? Levies? No Vine Regent will find us wanting. No Vine Regent will find us wanting. Hold true, boys. Hold true, boys.
So they kind of sound like World War I stereotypical English soldiers, but it's nice to have new unique voices for them, and it is rather fitting, I suppose. I mean, perhaps an accented kind of Italian may have been more on the cards, but we don't see anything wrong with the voices, otherwise we would have turned them down. So we've popped them in, as I say.
Regent's men.
So they just sound like posh English people, really. But anyway, so lastly then, we jump on to Dunland. Here we are then. The forces of the Dunlendings. And now, this time I've tried my best to actually separate them so you can't hear all the chants. And hopefully the voice volume might be a little bit louder now, so it might just be a bit clearer.
Unite, clansmen. Take back our lands. Access. Berserkers. 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 For Dunland. For Dunland. Hold your ground. Warband. For the glory of Dunland. For Dunland's honor. Stand with us. Raiders. For Dunland.
We will lead. For Dunland's honor. For Dunland's honor. Our honor will be restored. Full swords. Our honor will be restored. Let's move. Let's move. Which way? Horseman. To glory. Eisenmark. To glory. Dunland's finest. For Dunland. For Dunland. Take back our lands. Eisenmark. 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 Our honor will be restored. His Majesty walks with us. His Majesty walks with us. Slayers, let's move. Let's move. Javelins ready? Dunherd champions. This thing is heavy. Spears. Spears. Which way? Dunherd. Which way? Which way? Unite, clansmen. Hunters.
So there we are. So Dunland have a very, very sort of guttural and laced with hatred, but with a clear message of taking back what is theirs. Because, of course, Dunland's whole identity is built around the fact that the Rohirrim stole their lands. So that's reflected in their speech patterns. So those are the new voices, but also some voices have gone. And these are the taunt voices at the start of the battle. So when you first start the game, and indeed if we just line everyone up, you can hear them all shouting, "Pray for mercy," or, "Well, cut your heart out." Those speech lines have all been removed for the elves. It was deemed that the elves wouldn't really start every battle by telling, for example, the Brelanders that they're going to cut their hearts out. So the elves simply do not taunt. They now stand in silence, waiting for the ominous battle to come, which is very, very cool. So those voices have gone. But now we'll jump over and see all of the new units and all of the texture changes, etc. in one large-scale affair. Okay, so overall changes then. There's quite a few to get through. There's 3 new units. I think every single one of them has been discussed before, but maybe some of them haven't been seen before. But as I have already said, I'm just going to go down the list. So the new units will be wherever they are in the list. With many different things to look at. So, first and foremost, the Bodyguard of Elrond, which is the only place you'll ever see this unit, the Gil-galad's company.
It is not time for me to leave Middle-earth. We are called together at this dark hour. We must stand as one.
As you can see, have been given Elrond quotes, because he's the only general that ever gets it, so it is Elrond. But they've been given two-handed swords as their secondary weapon, and they have now got the Relentless trait, which is written at the very, very bottom. Relentless, so they cannot be staggered. It makes them very, very good in battle. So that's a very nice thing to look out for. Obviously, and when they have to use their bows first. Secondary, Calaquendi Lords, which is the standard bodyguard for the High Elves. You're looking at it here. They now have sword and shield. So they don't use a spear anymore, where they once did. All of the High Elven units that are based in Imladris, which is the Emanyar units, they now have the old golden armor as the officer. So, for example, the Emanyar Swordmasters, there he is. And all of the Linden base, which is the Sindar and Lindar, they now have the bluish style of Linden. And you can see him standing in the background just there. Or based on Mithlon Nobles, I think they are. Calaquendi Nobles, sorry. So those are just the bodyguard unit. So that's pretty cool. The Eregian Smiths have been edited slightly from the base game. I believe this is inspired or possibly borrowed from Reforged. But all that's really been changed is their helmet has been amended, if memory serves. It was felt that whilst the unit looked very, very elite, the kind of chainmail hood that they used to wear didn't really do them enough didn't really make them stand out as your most elite. So they've got that sort of feathery hood that Reforged has made so popular, and that's been popped onto them. The Noldorin Defenders, as was discussed, have been changed to a spear and shield. So the High Elf Elite 3, the Noldorin Defenders, Noldorin Archers, and Noldorin Swordmasters or Swordsmen, they are now just the standard High Elf Elite. So you've got one that's a spear and shield, one that's a two-handed sword, and one that uses bows. And then the more interesting weapons have been given to the Woodland Realm and Lothlorien, as we will see in just a moment. So, who am I allied with? Then we can go through their stats. Is this Dol Guldur? Yes, it is. So, Camul's Shadow Guard, who used to be a halberd unit, they have been made a two-handed sword. They do not have the Relentless trait. The Relentless trait is very few and far between. And only the Gil-galad's Company, the Nazkai of Isengard, the Northern Dunedain Generals, and the Lothlorien Generals, along with the Trolls of Gundabad, or the Half-Trolls of Gundabad, those are the only units that have got the Relentless trait. So not that many in truth. But anyway, there's Camul's Shadow Guard. So they've been made a two-handed sword instead of a halberd unit. And they can now hide anywhere as well. There are actually 3 units here on the battlefield. But as you can see, 2 of them are performing their duties excellently. But we're going to let the battle play out a little bit, because one of the things I need to show you... Oh, there were 4 of them. One of the things I need to show you won't take place until they actually attack someone. And it is Lothlorien. So we'll come back to Lothlorien. Looks like they're running miles away as well, so we might not see it for a while. But, here we are, the Kingdom of Gondor. So, Gondor, the main change for them is that the Minas Ithil Guardians now are two-handed swordmen, which you may have seen if you watched the DaC multiplayer game that I played with Brassidas and Mats and... someone else? I'm sure there was someone else. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned the names, because now that's going to look really bad on someone. I've got a terrible memory. Anyway, the Minas Ithil Guardians now are two-handed swordmen, not spearmen. Some people really didn't like this change, but they were literal clones of the Citadel Guard, except they had maybe 1 extra point of attack and damage, attack and defense. So it made total sense. So now they're a two-handed sword unit, which is a role Gondor doesn't really have. The other thing you may have noticed from the banner before you is that the background of Gondor's banner is now black instead of blue, converting them fully to their book description. Blue is not a colour associated with Gondor, so blue obviously is now fully for Dol Amroth, and Gondor have taken their right black colouring. We come over then to the Woodland Realm, where, as I say, some changes have been made. So, the old unit that was a spear has now been given the glaive that you see walking in front of you, which is present in some of the concept art for the Hobbit films. This glaive weapon is seen, so we felt it was better as a fit here than it was for the High Elves. I know a lot of people hate this fantasy weapon. They think it's completely disrespectful of realistic fighting mechanics, but there's only so many weapons you can add to a game before you run out of diversity options. So we've popped it in because why the hell not? It doesn't really change too much, and it looks good. So the one that used to be the spearman, which is the Heer en Ek, I think. I can't remember. Heer en Ek has been given the glaive, and the one that used to be a sword and shield now has an axe, fitting for the Sylvan elves, or the Sindar, oh not Sildar, but Sylvan elves, because they are said to be wild by Tolkien. And so the kind of axe. And also because we know, of course, that the Sindar favour an axe, and let's assume that the Sindar take up the elite roles in the Woodland Realm army, therefore they would choose axes. So that's the Woodland Realm. Oh, it looks like Lothlorien might be bearing down on Gondor, so we might want to head over there soon. The Anduin Vale, the only change is that their banner has been amended. There it is. 2 sort of separate banners stitched together, but it now gives them unique identity again, and it no longer looks just like their faction UI stuck onto a banner. They now actually have a bespoke banner. I think it looks really quite good, actually. Yeah, I think actually it looks really good, Mats. Well done. It really gives them a little bit of identity. It makes them seem a little like sort of Celtic almost, with the design on the bear. I really like that. I'm all for that. So anyway, so there's the Anduin, a change to them. Now we scoot over to whoever is here. Dorwinion, and our first new unit. But before we dive into our first new unit, it's just to show you that the helmets of the Dorwinion Regent units on the unupgraded version has been applied. The helmet that is present on the upgraded one is now used on the downgraded one too, because it is a totally unique helmet set that isn't seen on any other type of unit. And whereas the helmets that they used to wear were, I believe, taken from the Men of the Thorn, so it just adds the uniqueness back to this unit. So even on upgrade, you can see they've got that sort of fancy floral vine-like helmet, which I just think looks really, really cool. And of course, as we say, the Avari have been given a new friend, the Avari Spearmen. You will note that they throw javelins before they get their spears out, so they are a javelin and spear unit. And that's them walking before you. They have the exact same look as the rest of the Avari, but they have a very cool, unique shield that Hummingbird knocked up, which again has the sort of vine-like paraphernalia of Dorwinion. Now, the only thing we need Dorwinion to do is to change their banner, because they still do just have the faction icon stuck on a bit of card, or stuck on a bit of cloth. So we could do with giving them a new banner. I'll put that on the to-do list. But, anyway, so that's Dorwinion. A minor change to the helmets of the Regent units, which the Regents are my favourite units in the whole army, I have to say. And then a new spearman in the shape of the Avari. Coming over to the Northern Dunedain then, 2 new units, but one again I believe has already been seen before. But first of all, I popped in their bodyguard just to remind you that the bodyguard has the relentless trait now. So they're very, very good in melee when you finished with them with their bows. But the new unit is this one here, Arthedain Footmen they are called, and they are a pre-barracks event Arthedain unit. So that Arthedain is not purely represented after the barracks event, it now comes in before as well. And there they are marching in. You'll note they have a mace and a shield, so they are an early tier armor piercing unit for the Northern Dunedain. They only come from the Arthedain regions though, but they add some much needed punch into that early tier. And then the second unit, which is yet to have a name, I've shown before I'm sure, is the new pike unit, courtesy of Reforged. It is a halberd unit, sorry, and it will only be available from the Reunited Kingdom. When the Northern Dunedain becomes the RK, they will get this new unit. And it is just a halberd wielding version of armor that you will have already seen, I think. I can't remember where, but it's likely to come from key Numenorian cities such as Numenas, Fornost, Tharbad, Minas Tirith, places like that, for example. But that's that new unit there. Right, that is everything new unit-wise that I wanted to show you, and all of the sort of texture changes. But one thing that I really want to show you, and we can't do unless they attack someone, so we can speed it up and get them to... They seem to be approaching over there, so let's get them to... Oh, I'll just cut it. I'll just cut it till they do something. Alright, many people may not like this change. It may not be all that favoured, but you will note that the Gervaleg string 3 arrows to their bows. And if we can actually get one of the buggers to actually shoot someone, rather than just fake pulling, you will see, if I just pause it, that they actually shoot 3 arrows per volley now. And each of those arrows actually is a thing. It's not purely visual. They actually fire 3 arrows. You'll even see that they string 3 arrows as well, but again, they just didn't fire them. They're moving into position. I should have just controlled Lothlorien. I don't know why I thought letting the AI control them would be worthwhile here. Now, a lot of people may not like this, because again, it's a fantasy aspect, but it is only applied to the Gervaleg, who already are an incredibly niche unit, as I'm sure you are aware. They have like 5 arrows or something. They do insane body-piercing damage with their arrows. But their range is like 70 meters. It's less than javelins. So, and there's their little sword when they aren't, because they're all now unfortunately engaged in melee. But there we are. So the Gervaleg have got 3 arrows per shot, meaning their volley is now thrice as powerful. Or not really, probably about 2.5 times, because some of those arrows will hit the same target. But it just adds a much needed punch to the Gervaleg army. Something that was thrown around but has actually been removed was we gave for a time, or Hummingbird gave for a while, the Dwarven Ballista 2 bolts every shot. But unfortunately, oh, I haven't done the rest of Lothlorien, have I? Anyway, I'll finish this story. Unfortunately, the Ballista then became highly inaccurate because of the 2 bolts, and so that it was removed. Because they, despite having 2 shots per shot, they actually became far less effective. And of course, we were trying to make them more elite. So the changes to Lothlorien then is some minor changes visually to the Sentinels of Caer Amroth. You can see there they've got a new, again, polished chainmail armor. And they now have like lighter green cloaks rather than everyone being grey. Also, their elite units are no longer called Elbereth. They are now called Galathrim once more. So the Galathrim guards now have a halberd as well, rather than a spear and shield. So the Galathrim have a halberd elite, the Woodland Realm have an axe and spear, axe and shield, and a glaive, and the High Elves have the standard spear, shield, double sword, and bow. But there's Galathrim Swordmen, of course, as well, renamed, as I say. The Galathrim March Wardens have been renamed to Lothlorien March Wardens, and that's them running there. No visual changes, they just got a new name. And Elbereth Sentinels are the relentless ones. So when they pull out their two-handed swords, which they've got on their backs there, in their scabbards at the moment, they are relentless. They do not go down easily. And there's the last Galathrim archers. So those are the changes for Lothlorien. There's also a cavalry unit for Lothlorien that's been amended, but who knows where that is. So we'll just leave it to it in this carnage that's gone on. So there we are, the biggest changes to Divide and Conquer over the past few months since our release in March. What are we in now? June. Geez, 3 months, yeah. 3 months of no real updates on terms of DaC. So there we go. Now, there will be some further updates coming over the month of June. So there'll probably be another developer diary toward the end of June when I have done a long list of things that I needed to do. And more stuff has also come in from the others as well. But for now, that will be all. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And if you have any questions, please do post them below. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on what could possibly replace the terrain. If desert should be replaced with another type of terrain, then please do say. And I've just remembered that there was one final thing that I have not shown you, because I don't even read my own list. And that is that if a unit now has a movement speed bonus, it's been added to the base as well. So you know which units are now faster. Very much giving you as much information as we can. Yeah, so that's in there as well. Oh, and another thing that I'd listed, sorry. The chariot units for Rune and Canned are now better. They have an extra chariot per unit. And they also have 3 instead of 2 hit points. So they are much more survivable. Anyway, that is definitely now it. So, thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navair Naden Pedimad Melunin, and farewell.